Hello, this is Patrick Durkin. I want to welcome everybody to the Lovonya call, which is being open to the Wellness Enterprise community on Thursday, May 30th. We have the great privilege today of being joined by a friend across the pond in the UK. His name is Len Marlow, and he's been practicing with homeopathy for about 30 years, right, Len?
Yeah, more, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I stumbled upon him in 2020 when a friend of mine was struggling with sound sensitivity, and I ended up asking her about it, and she said she'd been working with Lenny, and I gave him a call, and I went through kind of my first version of the sound healing. So um, well, it was I guess it's kind of a long story that's not that important. So that was the first cut. I took like a big cut off it, and I always thought I was just kind of angry and aggressive and judgmental, and that it was just me not being able to accept sound. And then this year I recently moved into a home that's on a road where it's uphill and it's a straight part and the speed limit's 20, and there's a lot of trucks with wide tires and mopeds and other motorcycles on Maui. And they because this section's straight, they all gun it and they go about 60 right by my house with their engines just blaring at full force. And when it's wet outside, the tires make extra noise. And then there's also weed whackers and that come once a week. And there was an instance a couple of weeks ago where the weed whackers and the mowers came at like noon on a Monday, and they stayed. It felt like double long. And I got so debilitated by the sound that I put myself in the bathtub with a whole lot of Epsom salts. And at 2:37, I realized that I had a super important meeting that I was committed to that started at 2, mandatory meeting, can't miss it. And it was 2:37 when I realized that I had missed it. And so I was really disassociating, and so this has had a profound impact on my life. So I've re-engaged with Lenny, and I'm having some really big breakthroughs, including, being able to be here with you as, three people are down an open staircase and they're, talking really loudly, and I'm able to stay focused on our conversation, which is great. So since I started talking about this, I've been learning that a lot of people have been struggling with this. And so I wanted to invite Lenny to come talk with us as a community and share some of the wisdom that he's gathered in life, and learn about his perspective, some of his thoughts about life in general, and then homeopathy in particular. So Lenny, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really wonderful of you to be here. And
Okay.
yeah, you guys, Lenny's got a website, which at some point when he's talking here, I'll put a link to his website in the chat. And Lenny, if you would type your email address in there, or if you don't, I'll copy and paste it from my inbox, and I'll put that in there too. And just so we're clear as a community, Lenny is just available if anybody wants to contact him. I've hired him for personal sessions. He has a very reasonable fee for sessions, and then he charges a modest fee for shipping homeopathics out. And if you are inspired and you choose you want to engage with him, just contact him directly. There's nothing through the company or anything like that. We just want to understand about these concepts and have a place to go. And if anybody is resonating with that, by all means, go. So we did a little prep work, and we talked about a few questions that we thought might be interesting to get the conversation rolling, that are a little different than just getting into homeopathy. And I'd like to start there now. So Lenny, one of the things I've been touched by in our dialogue is your vision that the future is bright. And this world right now is a little bit chaotic, and there's a lot going on for people. And so could you talk with us a little bit about where you see the universe is going, and why you see things are bright?
Okay. I think so. One of the ways I review how things are going homeopathically is also to look at astrological concepts, put it that way. We've reached a point homeopathically where things are getting more complicated, and so homeopaths need to look for anything that helps them actually see more clearly. And um, uh, some aspects of astrology are very useful there. And one of the big aspects of astrology, which most people are familiar with, is we're moving into the age of Aquarius. It's been going on for a long while, and we won't be free of the previous age for quite a while. But the age of Aquarius is about communication and about humanity. So in the very broadest brushstrokes, we are moving to a situation where people want to engage with each other and want to actually look after people's lives, support other people, and also the Aquarian age will also be very individual. So it isn't that sort of cradle to grave socialist concept of providing free healthcare or free education. That may or may not happen. It'd be more about providing for looking after your neighbour or looking after someone who'd be even in to be classed as your neighbour.
Lenny, can you hold on 1 second
Yeah.
for me, please? I'm gonna mute everybody. Thank you guys for helping me see what's going on. I'm gonna mute all. And now, Lenny, I'm asking you to unmute.
Yeah. It's all gone quiet.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. And you guys, we love having a community conversation. So if at any point you want to ask a question to Lenny or just flow into the conversation, you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand or wave, and we'll just weave you in. That's how we roll. So Lenny, if you see somebody kind of edging in, just make space for them, and we find that that's the best way to have a community dialogue.
Yeah. And just to underscore that, this is not really a prepared lecture of any sort. So most of my statements are there to open up a response that's useful to you guys.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd like to, even take that a little bit further. Is like, there is a unified field that is guiding us, that is sourcing this conversation, that is something's available to be spoken about right now with this constellation of people. And we're here to have that conversation. And so if your voice belongs in the conversation, please make sure you get it in. And, Lenny and I'll do our best to make sure we say what there is to come through us. But it's much better when it's through you too.
And so going back to the broad brushstrokes of what's going on, COVID was another thing that is part of this change. COVID's not the disease, it's the symptom of what's going on. It's also happening while we are leaving the Piscean age. So the reaction to COVID was things like lockdowns, restrictions, containment, treating the weak with disrespect, wherever that was. And I don't know which countries you guys are all in, but in the UK, where I live and have grown up and always lived, there has been quite a lot of fallout, because while nobody in the country could party, anybody in government could. And there hasn't really been a proper reaction to that. So that's still got to be sorted out. Various politicians need to be sanctioned, and it hasn't happened yet. But it sort of the COVID itself, from just a disease point of view, was not dissimilar at all to the 1918-21 flu, although I think in America it was a 1920-23 flu because it arrived there later. In that it had these three phases of, first of all, it had a virus that whoever it contacted, people were seriously ill. Not good for the virus. It's not going to survive. The virus intent is to survive. So the second batch was more people got it, and they were ill, but a much smaller percentage died. And then the third phase is everybody got it, and they were just poorly, by and large. What has been different, or what I didn't research properly, and I still don't know yet, because I don't really want to go back to all that research, is there seems to be a fourth phase where everybody, every reaction to any other infection is contaminated in some way. People, and in the UK, it might be the same in the States, we've got this what's called a 100-day cough. It's not whooping cough because people have been tested for it. It's not really whooping cough, but they like to make out it's whooping cough because there's a vaccine for whooping cough. But people are taking longer. Interestingly, the two homeopathic remedies that seem to help most with getting people to be, inverted commas, cured of this cough, and we're talking predominantly of young people getting it, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, is to actually give pertussin, which is made from the whooping cough disease, but to give it regularly. So, I've dealt with quite a few cases, and I would give it in my normal model of prescribing, which would be to give the pertussis perhaps once or twice, or maybe once a week for a couple of weeks, and to give the other acute remedies homeopathically to deal with the disease. There's a concept in homeopathy called miasm, which is the background condition. And using the pertussis as the background condition, it should just need a dose or two, and then remedies work. It hasn't happened. So something is different that's going on with our health. The other thing that was very noticeable from COVID was that people who were ill after COVID, they weren't ill with things they hadn't had before. It took people back to things they had before. So in disease terms, if you had a weak chest 20 years ago, then you had COVID and you were 20 years older, you're not going to do very well. But it wasn't just disease symptoms like that. It was also people's relationships. It took you back to the messy bits that you just put to one side. So COVID was something like a general clearing in some way. And homeopaths came together internationally, very Aquarian. We had Zoom conferences once every month of probably 150 homeopaths from all over the world sharing information, and that's how we went forward. So that again, there's a new way of looking for homeopaths. Homeopaths before had been renowned for being, each one to his own, working on their own, and then through COVID, a huge collective coming together of practicing methods. Very good. Yeah. Do you want to ask something else?
Sure. Does anybody want to jump in around the Aquarian Age or COVID? Like you guys are welcome to jump in here with the questions with me. Yeah, Shira.
If I may share my research results on uncensored sites. SARS-CoV-19 is a collection of about 12 symptoms. They're pretty much identical to flus and cold. No virus has been isolated by anybody, despite million-dollar prizes being offered, and that includes the CDC. It is, according to Dr. Ardis, a collection of about 36 venoms, 26 reptilian and 10 marine animals. It is lab created in one of the labs of gain of function. We know exactly by whom, where, how, the path that it traveled. And all of the epidemics or pandemics in the past are apparently also bioweapons. I don't know if they're all venoms. This so-called pandemic was apparently a test case of something much more powerful to follow. And the game plan, the end of the game plan on everything that's happened is transhumanism.
Okay.
There it is. Thanks, Shira. How does that resonate with you, Lenny?
I so homeopaths are quite vulnerable to being tied up with any other thing that the media wants to call non-science. So I really look at the energy level of it rather than the factual. I have a science background, so I could, and I'm not disagreeing at all with those comments, but I just sort of sail past them and sort of work more towards, so what is going on an energy level? And certainly one of the ways you could, so the movement from Pisces to Aquarius will raise energies. You know, lots of models of the future talk about higher vibrations of people. And interestingly, the drugs that have been, you know, the vaccines do raise people's energy, but this is a chemical. So in some ways, it's almost like a chemical manipulation to try and be the future. And that, you know, maybe that's what's going to happen, but I'm much more inclined to think all of it will fall away. My guess is, though, we're looking at about 25 to 30 years from the COVID outbreak before we're through these issues and into a more truthful phase. But it has started. You know, things like this, you know, it has started in that people are moving more towards truth. Homeopaths were also recently looking at the hormones as remedies. And the word, again, that comes through there is truth. And the hormones, you know, if you're looking at evolution, there's a chicken and egg there. You know, you almost have to have the hormones before you can have reproduction. So how they couldn't evolve in humans or in the animals they're in. They've got to have had some sort of source outside that. I'm going very ethereal here. It may be that the conversations want to be more about, so, you know, as you started, homeopathy and how it would approach something like sound sensitivity.
Yeah, I think where you're going is great. And in fact, you know, one of the topics we talked about is expanding where the world is changing energy wise. So before we move into more of the literal stuff, I'd love it if you can just go a little bit deeper.
Okay.
And see whether, yeah, there's more.
So one of the virtues of homeopathy is the remedies are made, the medicines are made by removing the material substance in a special step-by-step way. Won't go into all that. So you are starting with remedies that are actually energy themselves. So what that means, apart from they're useful therapeutically when people get coughs, colds, this, that, and the other, hay fever, you also can see from the reaction to remedies where people are going or where people are being challenged or threatened. And what's been happening over the last 10 years in the UK is new remedies have been produced, some from things that other therapists will already use as energy protection. The shungite has been made as a remedy. Lodestone, which is ferromagneticum. Yeah, shungite has proved to be really good on a therapeutic level after you've been exposed to, you know, various radiations. So, you know, on a cancer point of view from MRIs, things like that, but also if you have loads of G5 masts and you happen to be, you know, endowed with great sensitivity. You know. Ferromagneticum as a remedy, again, is very useful because the lodestone was used for direction on ships before we had all these other things. And as an energy remedy, it's about, you know, lack of direction. You know, you've lost your rudder. It's not that you haven't, you might have lots, you know, like all of us here, I'm sure, have lots of information about where one could go or when your client should go in the future. But what's the route? What's the direction? Ferromagneticum has become a very useful remedy. There are lots of remedies like that coming through into practice. And also, they may come through as an energy remedy like emerald, which has been proved homeopathically and is really, I've found it's very useful to give sanctuary when someone has got some sort of trial to get through. Emerald will take away all the noise. I don't mean sound noise, but all the noise around them. It's been found very useful though, also around short-term surgery things, particularly like dentistry. If you're going to the dentist, then emerald gives you a safe place. And I personally have used it, and don't have any of the injections, painkillers. Just have the dentistry done. You may use other remedies that are more traditionally therapeutic to it, but the emerald gives you this little safe bubble, and it's very useful. So in that area, homeopathic remedies, there must now be probably 50 or 60 of them that deal with different sorts of energy stuff. Going back to the remedy that I gave you initially, and it's interesting how you talked about it, just because Nux vomica is a very, very common, which is the remedy I gave, a very common remedy for people who are perhaps ambitious, but they're driven. And how they often react to things is they have the potential to have, not that they're angry people particularly, but they can have outbursts of anger, and then they soon get over it. So you could think of a work situation where the boss is constantly dealing with all sorts of things. Then one day he just sort of throws his coffee cup across the room, and then an hour later it's all friendly again. There's a sensitivity in Nux vomica. Its main active ingredient is strychnine, which we are very sensitive to. So I've used it as a travel remedy for people that get terrible air sickness, and end up lying on the floor on the planes, that and the other. Nux vomica is great for that. Nux vomica, outside that sort of common picture, homeopathic remedies, often you choose an axis in them, and it's this axis between ambition and thwarted ambition. So you often see it coming up in people that have been very driven and been very successful at whatever they're doing, whether it's having a family or whether it's running a company or whether it's solving problems or whatever. And then suddenly it's stopped. They've been pushed to one side by something in their relationship, or the company's been taken over and the new boss is stopping them, or if it's a creative idea, they've reached a point where they just can't see around their core anymore. And that thwarted stuff is the disease side of the Nux vomica picture. And that's where you tend to find people coming into your clinic with that bit. It's the sensitivity. So on a very topical level, Nux vomica, you give it as a hangover remedy. After a party, next morning you wake up feeling like you've eaten golf balls, and Nux vomica, if you'd have taken it before the party and in the morning, you're back off to work. You'll be dehydrated, but apart from that, you can get on. So it's that sort of axis, interesting in how it's worked for you, in that it's brought the sound issue into a manageable area where you could do things about it. But it's also, as this shows, it's given you new drive in what to do, new ambition or new clarity. Very Nux vomica.
Interesting. You guys, one of the things you might have noticed while we're having the call is that I put these in, and these, I'm going to put a link to these in the chat. So these are described as EMF radiation-free earbuds. And so they have hollow tubes, and it's one of the measures that I put in place as a supporting structure to support the homeopathic work that I've been doing. And I put them on during the call, not because I couldn't handle the noise downstairs, but I find sometimes that when I take an act of self-care, like putting these in, it brings my focus in more, and I feel like I'm in taking care of myself. It's like it gives me a little boost of pride, or a little boost of self-love. I'm not quite sure what the right word for it is, but I end up feeling better. So I wanted to share those with you. And if you do end up buying them, um, they don't come with one of these. They just come with the mail part that goes in. So they put it right on their sales page, but I didn't understand when I was buying it. So if you do buy it, I'm going to unplug my mic for a second.
Yeah.
I think you guys all saw that. That's what they come with. So I'll get that link, and while I'm doing that, Nikki's got a question. So Nikki, yeah, thanks for your patience, and please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm really fascinated with the going into the Aquarius age. It gives us a lot of hope. And I have one question and one comment. How is the emerald used? Like I'm picturing you having an emerald stone to go and you put in your hand while you go to the dentist office. Is that what you're talking about? Or
No, I mean, well, right. What's your career back? What do you do therapy-wise?
I'm a chemical engineer, but I'm anti-vaccine. I see a functional medicine doctor. I'm all natural or organic, non-plastic as much as possible.
If you're operating on a functional energy medicine level, then it would probably work for you using the actual stone, just taking it with you, right? Because you can tune in with the energy. But for your clients, you would homeopathically, there's a remedy being made from the emerald.
Oh.
Yeah, a titration made from the emerald, and that is just the best way to describe the remedies is they're like a CD with software on, and you put
Say
it
that
into the machine, like a CD with software on.
Oh, okay.
And you put it into the machine, which is the person, and the person can pick up the information. So rather than having the emerald, they have the transcription of the emerald. Yeah.
How do they do that?
I wouldn't be able to tell you precisely how they turned that particular emerald into a liquid, although I would think it would. One way would be that you have the stone in alcohol and you sun expose it, and then you take that liquid, which will have been there for a set amount of days exposed to the sun, and then you start diluting that liquid again and again and again to get the different levels. If you take something a bit more logical, like bees, there's a remedy called apis made from bees. That would be a single queen bee, and the whole body would have been crushed and made into like a herbal tincture, and then it's diluted several times to get the different levels of a homeopathic remedy.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So once you get to the 12th dilution, you've passed the material stage, which there's a number called Avogadro's number, which is
Like 0.022 times 10 to the something.
yeah, okay. I won't go through that again then. So most homeopathic prescriptions where you're dealing with the person rather than the pimples or the acne will be beyond that 12th, 30s, 200, 1000 dilutions, that sort of thing. If you are using the lesser dilutions, which have still got some herbal state in, then you are going to predominantly be looking at something on the skin, eczemas, or some a toxic liver or toxic kidneys, where there's still some need to have the physical remedy as well. I don't think there probably isn't for the gemstones. There probably aren't any I've never used them at that low potencies. I've always used them at 30s or 200s or 1Ms or 10Ms. The potentization is really useful. I mean, first of all, you can access poisons like snake poisons without poisoning people to get the energy out of it. But also the high dilutions, the 10Ms and that, they go beyond the person's body. So you can treat a baby in utero with 10Ms, or you can a dysfunctional family and you've got the person in front of you. They're not the problem, but they're the ones that are suffering. You use a 10M potency and it changes the dynamics in the family. And the next thing you know, the violent husband's been arrested or whatever. You think, oh, that's good news. That was just a theoretical thing. But yeah, I treated a woman that hadn't seen her brother for 19 years, worked out what the remedy was because of the issues, gave the remedy at a 10M potency. And the next thing that happened, as soon as she took it, her brother rang her, not her ringing the brother. You know, and just think, wow, it's amazing. The 10M potency is very useful. And obviously nowadays, where we are transitioning into new spaces, it's really good. And you don't need, because you're actually working at a remedy that's beyond the body's physical functions. With a small amount of training, a homeopath, well, no, I know an awful lot of other therapists that will use remedies like that. They'll either use a first aid level of like the 30%, or they'll use the 10Ms, a cranial osteopath, or a Bowen technician. These people will often use homeopathic remedies at that level to change the dynamics of the case.
This is fascinating. I'm just now learning about homeopathy. I started watching some shows on Gaia about it, and it's fascinating. And it's an alternative, because I'm actually trying to put together a little podcast on vaccines, and I just tell my story and try to help mothers make that critical decision to go completely anti-vaccine. But so many of them are scared, and I realize I need to give them an alternative, and they can't all afford a functional medicine doctor and the laundry list of supplements to boost their immune system. They need something that's affordable and just alternatives. You can't just say don't get a vaccine, because they're too scared.
So you talk about moms with young babies, really.
The childhood vaccines.
I always go very cautiously with them, because I have to respect where they are and where they've come from. But I will always say to them the bits that I know, as opposed to the bits I receive from all the articles you can get, is that the main problem is the myelin sheath isn't complete till about 18 months. So until 18 months, the nerve system is extremely vulnerable. By 3 months, there's quite a lot of stability. So I would always encourage parents to defer the decision till after 3 months. That also gives them 3 months to explore. And there's a really good book by an Australian woman. So what you, in the end, I'll sidestep that. What you're really looking for with vaccines is a book that's good for blokes, because the women get it and the blokes don't.
That's guys, men.
I'm generalizing, but it's pretty accurate. So there's a book by Vera Schneiber, I think it is, an Australian vaccine handbook, and she trawled through, it's a bit out of date now, but she trawled through all of the literature. It would be 1990, that sort of time. There are probably better books now, but that was a brilliant book and very accessible to the number crunchers in the world. And then there's a couple of other really good books. I could post the names of the good books.
I found this. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Paul Thomas He and I love his approach because he's not saying don't get vaccinated. I call it like a gateway book. After I read this book, I didn't want to give my baby a vaccine. But he tells you, he coaches people on what's in the vaccine. He tells them how to find it. He tells them the ingredients. He tells them how the doctors are graded on the schedule and how they're basically paid to push vaccines on you all at once. You know, like a 2-month-old baby gets 8 diseases and 6 vaccines. And then he tells you to either, it's your choice. And he reminds everybody that you have a choice. You could space them out, and then he teaches the mothers about breastfeeding and nutrition and all that. So I like it because he's not saying don't get vaccinated. He's just informing you of what kind of decision you're making and what you're giving your child.
There's a wonderful organisation in the UK called the Informed Parent, which you could access. The woman it's a single woman that's run it, and she's run it now for nearly 40 years. And she would be absolutely, a good source and eager to help you, yeah.
What is it?
The Informed Parent.
Oh yeah, Informed.
Yeah.
So, and I'm done. Thank you for answering the question. I'll make one quick comment and then let you move on. About the energy level and sickness. And it's weird because I met Patter a while back and we did a podcast on water. And I was just listening to a guy, he has a website called Cultivate, Elevate, and he talks about water too. And he talked about how to make big pharma drugs, they take primary water and they deionize it. So they take out the energy, and then they put that in the pills, in the big pharma pills. So then that's in your body, and then that like sucks out your energy. And then I was reading with the vaccines, Dr. Paul explains that the aluminum and all the metals in the vaccines take out electrons from our body. They take out energy. So, I mean, it's like everything's taking our energy out. You know,
if you looked at if you said, well, how does a vaccine work? And not on just a biological level, but it works in somehow or other committing our immune system to defending itself. So the original, vaccine comes from the French vache. It was cowpox given for smallpox, right? So they were giving cowpox to people, and they would cut the skin and put it in. So the body had a surface reaction. Now we use these hypodermic syringes. It's already jumping some of the natural reaction. We don't have the skin. People can, but by and large, people don't have a skin reaction, a site reaction. And the original intention was quite logical. If you could give somebody protection for a few weeks, the disease would have moved on to somewhere else. Yeah, because diseases move. Yeah, they sort of move across a country rather than they're just there. They're not just there, they are transmitted, And somewhere along the line, we changed from vaccination to actually inoculation. Vaccination uses something similar. Homeopaths at the time were involved in the philosophical debate that was going on to produce these inverted commas cures or protections, more likely. And cowpox is similar to smallpox. So the body would have to do the work. It's got a bit of information, it has to do the work. So it's going to give you a better immune response. Inoculation takes the disease and disarms it a bit, and then you have protection. But that protection is taking up a finite amount of your immune system. And that might be fine if the disease was extremely life-threatening. But, things like the whooping cough vaccine, by the time you've got to 8 months, after that, you have to be pretty immune compromised to die of it. So to commit the whole world population to being vaccinated for, the 1 or 2, if you've got to 8 months, after that, the 1 or 2 people that might die of it is absurd use of your immune system. So that's another way of looking at it. Perhaps you should just move on from vaccines to something else.
Thank
Well,
you.
let's move on to sound healing. Thank you for the lively discussion, Nikki and Lenny. Sherry, you have a question?
Yeah, before we get off the topic of vaccines, and I'm so glad this is focusing on energy. My understanding is that a virus is actually a exosome or a little thing that updates and informs our body. It's like a recalibration, an input of information that our body needs in order to have a strong immune system and to stay healthy. Again, it's interesting to have your response to my comment, Len. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to see what's happening with plastic waste at the bottom of the ocean, where there are creatures, viruses or bacteria, have learned how to digest the plastics. So there's a constant exchange between bacteria, virus, and the ultimate product of bacteria and virus, which is humans. It's not a war, it's a symbiosis. And the symbiosis requires change in humans. So some humans, as a virus is mutating, there will be, if the concept of viruses, which is, a pathogen that goes unchecked, well, we would have died what would have stopped it? And it has never happened. So, and in the scheme of things, the whole life force of the planet isn't that interested in a few individuals. The whole thing is trying to go forward. We as therapists, our job is to deal with the individuals and to give them the best chance of being on the right side of the problem. But the viruses have no interest in killing everybody, but they're also not that bothered about the odd death. So that's the space we're working in. The other thing about the method we have of using a vaccine or whatever, if you look at the polio vaccine or the whooping cough vaccine, by the time they were introduced, the disease outbreak is usually at something like 2 or 3% of its height, so it's well on the wane, so for medicine to claim huge success about these things that isn't really supported by the actual scientific data. And also, it's very easy to demonstrate a drug of any sort can work in vitro, in a laboratory situation, which might even be a trial, where there's all sorts of support around, as there has to be ethical. That's very different to actually giving it to everybody, where there's no control. Will the success be the same? It's unlikely.
Okay, thanks, Len. We've got another question from Rick. And then I do want to turn this to sound, guys. That's what I advertised, and I'm really interested to get to that. But I'm so glad you guys are enjoying our guest and engaging with him. That's exactly what I hope you would do.
Yes, it's always a nightmare to get involved in vaccine issues.
Well, let's see where Rick takes us.
Yeah, so just one question. I got involved with Bruce Lipton in a workshop, and he was talking about viruses are really the communication strategy among bacteria. They send out viruses to communicate to each other. and then we pick
Yeah.
it up in the wave. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So it's their communication, which we're getting hit with. It's not meant to take us out, but so we overreact to it. Is that pretty much the way that thing works out?
Yeah, I think that's a very good philosophy to approach all these things from. That if if the reports are saying we've been attacked by viruses, that's probably not what's going on. The viruses are there and change is coming. Would be the best way to look at it. Certainly in the UK, it was relatively easy not to be, oh, it's difficult to say this, isn't it? No, I just won't say that. No, it's fine. So, I agree with what you're saying. Yes.
Sounds good. All right, so so let's talk about time for a second. So first off, I want to presence the topic of the sound suffering that some people it seems are having. And so if anybody wants to describe their experience, just kind of, jump into the conversation and say how they suffer. Since I started on this healing journey, I'll make room for you in a sec, Shira. Since I started on this journey, I've been having different awarenesses, and it's changed my understanding what trauma is. And one of the things that I understand now about trauma for me is that trauma equals overwhelm. So something happened with mom or dad or a group situation or with sound, it turns out in many instances, where there was too much for little me, whether that was little me who was a day younger than I am now or little me who was a little boy, but he got overwhelmed by an amount of life experience. Let's say he had a certain belief and something came in that happened that really just knocked that belief down. And then, oh, by the way, there might be a lawnmower going at the same time. So I was listening to a podcast today, and I noticed that when the two doctors started laughing really loudly, every time they did it, I reached out to the volume in the car and turned it down. And it makes sense to me. Like I haven't been a particularly laugh-oriented guy in this lifetime. Like I don't laugh a lot. I got teased on a date when I was 38 years old, the first one I went on after my marriage, that she said, do you know you don't laugh out loud? And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. And about 6 months later, I was still with her, and I snorted for the first time. And when I snorted, she would snort, and then we would like trade snorts back and forth, and we would just like laugh hysterically. But I really haven't, like, it's definitely the last 16 years of my life that there's been more laughing and not so much the 38 before that. And so I was wondering, listening to that podcast today, like what happened? Like way back when, like what was the thing that made really loud laughter bother me? And there's lots of things I can imagine around that. I'm just letting the awareness seep through. So I've been aware for a long time that this culture has gone pretty far in the direction of the noises that you hear when trucks back up, or when they have one of those machines that they use to go up to the top of a building and then they move those around. There was one about a mile from my house in Hull, and by the way maybe it wasn't a mile, like a half mile is more accurate. By the way the acoustics were coming up the hill and the buildings, every time they moved their machine, I was in my office just like beside myself. And I finally went down there and I was like, you got to turn that off. And they're like, we can't turn that off. And I was like, you can and you will. And they're like, no, we can't. And so we had this battle for 2 days until I got evidence from the company that makes the machines that the sound could be turned off, and they turned it off. And so we have this assumption that these backup noises and then the small engines with the weed whackers and the lawnmowers and the blowers and all of that, people used to rake their lawn. And now it's like in the neighborhood every day, depending on the size of your neighborhood and where you are, you might have those type of machines coming in once or twice a day, all days of the week. It's like it's getting more and more rare. And now that I'm traveling again right now, I'm noticing when I go to a property that doesn't have a lot of sound, and I can hear birds and hear wind moving the leaves and stuff, how different my life experience is. So I don't know how sound got blended into that. And before we get Len's take on it, I'd love for you guys to share a little bit about any sound sensitivities you have. Nikki, hold on one sec, because Shira waved first. So I'm gonna start with her and then I'll come to you. And just like, let's presence this together. Like, what is this sound sensitivity? What are we going through collectively? And then we'll talk a little bit more about approaching it. Shira?
I'll make it short, Nikki. As someone with a degree in music, of course, I'm sensitive to sound, and noise has always bothered me. In the 21 years I've lived here, the 2 dogs across the street, non-stop. So I've just done what I call get bigger than and encompassed it. It went over the edge last week when I was at a game party. I have this wonderful group of women friends, and it wasn't my closest people, but it was 7 of the women I know. I'm sitting at the table with them, and they're not speaking, they're shouting. And it got so painful, physically painful, that I had to move to another part in the room and just have a conversation with somebody. I couldn't hear her because they were so loud. And this is a new level of sensitivity for me. So thank you for doing this, Len. Nikki, your turn.
Yeah, thanks, Shira. So we've got loud conversations, loud laughter, loud music, engines, the beep beep noises when they back up. Where else is this coming at us from, and what are we experiencing? Zane, we'll come to you next. We'll go to Nikki now.
It's funny because I moved out to the country, and so now I hear the birds chirping. I mean, the only noise I hear is my dogs. But the first thing that occurred to me, and when I lived in the suburbs, I remember the lawn guy would come over, and it was so annoying because they were mowing the grass and I couldn't talk on the phone or I couldn't hit the TV. It was so annoying. But now that I've dove into frequency and vibration, the first thing that came to me is it's lowering your vibration. That's all low vibration noises, the motors, the lawnmower, the weed whacker, and the trees, the wind, the birds. That's all nature and high vibration noises. And it makes sense that it annoys you because it's lowering your vibration. It's negative. It's man-made. It's not nature.
That's a great way to look at it, Nikki. Thanks for presencing that for us. Zane?
Yes, one of my processes I'm involved in now is not letting the external affect me, like the ambient level of sound. I've always been sensitive to it, and I live in this beautiful, peaceful place now, but I live adjacent a light traffic 2-lane highway, and it has its moments of commuting in the morning and whatever. But it's not as gripping as it normally would be, because I'm trying to learn to focus more internally and not let it drain my energy or distract me. And I had a beautiful way to measure it. I took it all the way. I happen to live just south of this wilderness preserve, the Gila Mountains of New Mexico, southwestern New Mexico, and I went to the very end of this road, and it terminates at the cliff dwellings and all, and it's pure silence. I was struck by it. I just towers around, no discordant energy. It was pure, and I'm thinking, wow, what a gem, what a precious resource. Aldo Leopold had set aside this huge tract of land and preserve it as wilderness. And I think it's a global treasure. And so I just feel so grateful to actually measure it and feel the difference between ambient noise and all of that. It's going on all the time, inevitable, and pure silence. And that inspired me to focus on silence more.
Yeah, that's a good one, Zane. I took a trip to Alaska about 20 years ago, and I would describe it as it was so big and silent, it felt deafening. Like that's just the best way that I can speak it. And I love what's coming through in the conversation about focus and getting bigger than something. One of the strategies that I'm taking on now is first off, by the way, since I put these in, the noise from downstairs is like 95% reduced. Like I just don't hear it. So if you, what I love about these is I'd gotten to the point where if I traveled on an airplane, my normal Apple headphones were not loud enough for me to hear my content over the plane. And these are loud. And so they're kind of like wearing earplugs and earphones at the same time. And so they're simultaneously blocking them out, but also putting us in a lot louder. So bringing us up, bringing our focus up, I think is part of the game here. And so I've started like playing different solfeggio, so however we say that, frequencies, guys know what I'm talking about, and creating more harmony in my home than the external noise is dragging it down. And then I just figure out how to like get my work vibe in tune with the higher noise in the home. And then I work from that harmony instead of from the detraction out there. Does anybody else want to present anything else about their experience with sound sensitivity before we jump over and get Len back in the conversation? Yeah, Marcia.
Yeah, I have in my attic, or in my roof, I should say, I had to put a fan in it in order to cool the upstairs, whatever you want to call it. And that bothers me a lot.
Yep. Yeah, that's another one. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for getting that in the conversation too. So, so Lenny, help us deepen the topic. Like, what do you think about what I said about trauma and what we're all experiencing? Like, what's going on here? Vibration, frequency.
Okay, the first thing you were talking about trauma, and I think you mentioned something that's quite profound, in that trauma has something to do with a childhood experience. When homeopathic, you're treating people in the end part of their lives, you are often looking at quite standard first aid remedies, like arnica, because falling in old age is quite traumatic. But any of the trauma that's happening in old age will relate to things that went on when they were very young. And I think that's also interesting, that it also starts to complete the circle, So I have worked with people with Alzheimer's, and where there is a lot of sensitivity. And there you often find Alzheimer's is occurring in old people. It can occur earlier now, but you're often using homeopathic remedies that they would have had in childhood. So there's a cycle going on. And I just think wherever you guys are working with people where there's trauma, and the trauma might obviously, let's say it's a sexual abuse trauma in adulthood, you would still look back to the childhood to see what prepared them to be that victim or that trauma situation. So I just pick up that was something you touched on.
Sure.
Is general and is quite relevant at the moment because we're going through these cycles. But what was interesting, I don't have particular experience of particular issues with sound. I prescribe to you on the fact that it's sensitive to loud noises. But a couple of things that are very interesting that there's a remedy actually made from blackbird song. And that is a remedy that brings clarity at times of great change. Yeah, brings back purpose for life's path, both in direction and if it's going to take an unexpected turn. So what that made me understand also is that a lot of sounds that alarm us, raise alarms in us. And for you, you're talking about these machines and that. they're also asking us to get some sort of clarity about what we're doing. So, on a very basic level, your reaction to the guy with the big machines down the road was to go and confront them and get it resolved. That's very Nox Vomica, right? And in fact, it will be useful. It's useful to have the noise dealt with, but it's also, rather than like a virus, it's useful to find out what the message was, what the communication was all about. I worked in pop music for 20 years. So on one level, I've got bits of my hearing that just don't function anymore. It's all right. I always joked then, by the time you can afford the stereo you want, you can't hear it. But on just on that, we're constantly now given these sort of MP3 type things. The bandwidth is very narrow. When I play my phone through my hi-fi system, it's nothing like the vinyl record. I mean, it's just, there's no comparison. I do have a very good set of speakers, but why have those set of speakers unless you've got vinyl? Because the rest of it, there's lots of reasons, technical reasons why it isn't as good, but the big one is the narrowing of bandwidth. And I suppose that's also a problem with a lot of these machines, because they have, in lots of ways, the main problem with sound is its harmonics. We might be able to tolerate a particular sound, but the harmonics are the things that actually alarm us, literally. It's worth looking with anything that's annoying us sound-wise at how that sound is made up and what it's doing, what its function is. It's going to be an alarm of some sort. Going back also to people talk about being in nature, and I mentioned blackbird song, but you all mentioned hearing the sound of birds. The birds, of course, are the things that we have between earth and heaven. A lot of the bird remedies are remedies of spiritual transition, and I don't mean necessarily faith spiritual. I mean spiritual growth. The passage from into being the seer, or the person that has got that sits with knowledge, not got knowledge, sits with knowledge and allows it to communicate to others, which is for many therapists, that's their journey in some way or other. Not that they're fighting to do that in that sort of driven way, but it's what arrives on their doorstep slowly as they meet more clients and give more prescriptions, whatever that might be. Yeah. So I suppose where I would put the sound, in cases where there's a general noise, as it was for you, then homeopathy just in itself can help. Where it's a specific noises, it tend to have to unravel what that, yes, the remedies will work, but you're also trying to unravel what that journey is about. Why that person's been alarmed in that way. When you participant talking about the fan overhead, there's a couple of things that are going on there. One is, I know that those fans create a beat sound, as well as the mechanical sound. They compress the air in a way that goes, boom, 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 and these things, which are sort of down almost to heartbeat sounds, could be raising all sorts of alarms in our body. We shouldn't be able to hear our heartbeat. If we're hearing our heartbeat, what's going on? Are we losing lots of blood? Is any of that helpful?
I think it's all helpful. I think this is an important dialogue. One of the things that came up in the chat is that sometimes people have sensitivities to people tapping, whistling, humming, twitching, pacing. That can be a hard one. That's kind of the origin of all this for me. I had a lot of trauma around my older brother and slurping cereal, and gosh, being around people eating for decades was hard for me. And so, what would you say about when we're experiencing another being kind of persistent or loud with something? What's that pointing at?
Say that again.
What
That
is
last bit.
that? Yeah, what is that pointing at? What can you talk at all about what you think that might be?
So what you were talking about, again, are all particularly common things in nux vomica, where they can cope with a necessary noise like the vacuum cleaners running, but the sound of somebody rattling the teacups is just too much, because you don't need to rattle teacups. It's the unnecessary. And what I would think it is often is the other person saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm important. You're not important. It's sound is communication, and communication can be good or can be pathological. It's the same axis you're dealing with, as can silence. You can have deafening silence. Some people cannot cope with silence.
Does anybody have a particular sound sensitivity that they want to get Len's live feedback on? A good time for it.
All right. Go for it.
Okay, Patricia.
Tinnitus.
Ah, yes. So homeopathically, you say, I mean, it's a terrible thing, tinnitus. And what is interesting is we all have it all the time. And in the condition tinnitus, that the individual is hearing it. If you ask somebody, can they hear that? Can they hear anything in their ears, swishing or whatever? The majority of people say, oh, yes, I just don't notice it, though. I can hear it when now you told me,
So
But-
loud.
Sorry?
It's so loud, and it's a tritone. So it's two pitches and they are discordant. And so it's like always grating.
Yeah, it's like scratching a knife on a plate.
Or playing a tritone on a piano and just never getting any relief from that discordance.
Are you a musician?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
Why did that stop?
Because I didn't have the talent to keep up with my ambition.
Okay.
Because other things were equally wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a path not trodden.
Yeah.
And homeopathically, you'd wander down that path. Not you personally, the homeopath would wander down that path. Because, and how old were you when you stopped playing?
I played through college, and then I sang.
So in your late 20s you stopped, or in your late 20s you stopped, or earlier than that?
Mid-20s. Mid-20s. But there were also some other life circumstances that have nothing to do with anything that got in the way.
Astrology, it's one of the Saturn return points. 28 is the actual Saturn return point. And that's where, well, first of all, it's where in Chinese medicine we are now adults. We are now masters of our own functions. But also in astrological terms, it's where we take a new road or don't. And the implications are of, if it was a good road and life went fantastic, yeah, it was the right one. If life's gone okay, then there's always a residual alarm about what should be done. And so, one of the things, if you worked with a homeopath, they would do is they would look at that transition to find out, because it's interesting. the strange thing about your tinnitus is the discord.
But I've had it since I was 3 or 4.
Oh, very interesting. So what was at that age, what was done about it?
Nothing, my mother laughed and she said I was bats in the belfry, which is a way of telling somebody that they're crazy. So
Yeah.
I never mentioned it again. But I've
And
had,
when you were
it
singing,
I was a
when
child.
you were singing, did it go away?
That's a really interesting question. I will have to observe that. I don't know.
Hmm. When were you at your happiest in life?
When I was 16, 17, 18,
Hmm.
20, say 16 to 20.
Yeah. And you had the tinnitus then?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that's where the homeopath would focus on. So why didn't the body carry on managing it? Why has it got to be a burden? And also this discord. It's very interesting, the discord in it.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Most people with tinnitus they can have high and low, but
Mine are both.
they don't really mingle. They don't produce because they have totally different qualities. You know, the low is sort of a rumbling sound. You know, I remember when I had that at one point in my life, I thought I'm going to have to go and complain that factory is starting up its machines too early in the morning. The factory was not a factory, it was a warehouse. There were no machines, it was my ears, you know. And that low sound was
Well, it's interesting that you say that because the pitches that I always hear are and I do trauma work. We try very hard never to use the word always because it's a word of inescapability. But they're both very high pitches. But I have all of my radios and things set with the bass turned way down.
Yeah.
Because I have very low tolerance for a thumping, serious bass.
Yeah. And did you go? Were you into nightclubs and rock and roll when you were
Never,
20?
never. Couldn't even go to rock concerts, nothing.
Oh.
Not loud bars, not loud parties.
And what happens there? The noise increases or you just can't hear it. It's just
my whole nervous system just fries.
Yeah. Okay. So what a homeopath would do would put all that to one side and find out how that is replicated in your personal story, because that would be the remedy. You know, so like with the case we talked about with Lux Vomica, you know, looking at what that person's approach to life is and how it works, and then it happens to cover all that sensitivity to noise. Oh, good remedy. So again, you'd look at your story and initially just look at the tinnitus as noise, which is a generalization, and see where you got to. And if that's not getting there, then you'd start pricing the tinnitus apart. There are remedies that specifically for tinnitus, but giving remedies that are more general for the person tends to have a better and longer lasting effect. Yeah. Is that helpful?
That makes sense.
That's great, Lenny. I want to kind of broaden out a little bit and just kind of distinguish a little bit of what I just saw happening. So did you guys see the way Lenny got curious and he just started asking questions? Like that's what my sessions with him have been like. Like we just go and talk and he just asked me questions I never would have put together. And then, by the end, I think the second time we met, you sent me something with red-tailed hawk. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was to take half of it in Texas, and then I was going to Sedona, and I took the other half of it there. It was perfect. It was a really cool experience. So I want to take the mystery out of working with you away for people. So for people that want to contact you, I want to say into the video in case somebody's watching and can't find the link that it's lennymarlow@gmail.com, Lenny Marlow, LOW. And then your standard fee, you charge a consultation fee and then something to send the homeopathics. And the consultation fee is
$100 in the States and $16 for the $20 for the postage. Yeah.
okay. So guys, you're looking at like $120. And I found Lenny to be really generous with his time, and he just comes on and we talk until he understands and he says, okay, I've got it. And then he mails it to me and it shows up in the mail. So if anybody's inclined, why I brought him to you is I think, we have somebody in our presence who has wisdom, who has life experience and wisdom and can help us with things. So I wanted to have this conversation globally so that people understand that sound sensitivity is something that we're sharing and it's not really a big topic and we can do something about it. But I also want to open up for you anything that you're experiencing. If you find Lenny's approach to be accessible to you and you like the way he talks and asks questions, just call him up and have a session. And it doesn't have anything to do with the Wellness Enterprise. We just want you to know that he exists and have the capacity to go contact him. So that's his email address and that's how he works. And that's pretty easy. So
And it's a bit of a two-way street as well, because so I work with autistic children, or work with autistic people, and they're particularly if they're non-verbal. I mean, in autism, sensitivity is sort of one of the biggest issues you've got. Sound sensitivity is one of them. And if actually working with non-autistic people, you find out more about the differentiation in what the sound disturbances are about. That's going to really inform how you approach those autistic cases that don't respond to a general, quite a lot of autistic children, the remedy tarantula can be very helpful, which is a spider remedy, But you're basing that on the fact that, the spider is very sensitive to, it hears something on the web, literally, and then it doesn't do anything until it can see and capture, So there you would find, well, what I was doing, autistic children that do repetitive things, but also that could be to be blocking out sound, but also, that they are sensitive to repetitive noises. Oh, right, okay, that's tarantula. And tarantula, interestingly, if you look at it from a psychodynamic point of view, the remedy, spiders have 8 legs, and has got something to do with the parents' collective involvement, because between them they've got 8 limbs. So in a Freudian level, that can be a sexual thing, but it's much more beyond that. Something to do with the match in the parents. And the problem, of course, with that is if you raise that with the parents, that's the end of the consultation. We are not to blame. No, I didn't say that. It's much, much more energetic. It's something to do with the unity that produced this child is the cause of it. And it's, the tarantula, the 2 things we know about tarantulas. One is if you get stung by a tarantula, you have to dance like mad to get it out of your body. And it's frenzied. The tarantella comes from the word for tarantula. So there's it is deathly, but also it's totally restless. It's all over the place all the time. So the sound disturbance in tarantula is tied up in all that restlessness and its sensitivity to beating sound dance again. So you can see you wouldn't mistake it for Nux vomica, because it has the rhythms and the deathliness. The spider bite can kill you, and I think after the female tarantula has actually copulated, she eats the bloke. It's not a good world to be in.
It's not if you're a bloke, for sure. So you guys, you hear Lenny's wisdom coming through, and that was the point of the call, is to let you know about that. I need to wrap up, and so you've got his email address in the chat. If you haven't captured it yet, it's up at the top. Please grab it. For those watching the replay, I'm going to put his website and his email into underneath the video, so just look below it. And if you guys have more with him, just email him directly and ask him questions, schedule appointments if you want to, do whatever supports you. I got a request to put the email again. I'm happy to do that. And you know, if anybody has a closing question or comment, this is your moment.
Marcia?
Yes, I would love to have you back.
Oh, well, what would happen, I think, is I get some feedback, and then I might actually have some collective thought and could talk about something that was of use to you, rather than this, you know, it's quite tiring for you all for me to just pick at various bits. One thing I'd just like to just sort of, you just talked about my knowledge and experience. It's not, it's universal. You know, I don't own it. It
Appreciate,
comes
yeah.
and it's free to other people, really.
I appreciate your humility and your wisdom. Like, I think that comes with age too. You know, as we age, we get some nice characteristics about us, and it's lovely that you embody that. And yeah, all the best things in life are free. Life gave it to us before we even took a breath, and it's all this man-made stuff that makes us forget that. But you pointing us in that direction and letting us know it's universal knowledge, and it just makes me admire you even more. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask.
And the greatest thing you can pass on to another practitioner is tell them not to try and get the right remedy, or try and get, you know, as soon as you bring a strong ego into solving someone else's life, I would say problem, life, yeah, you get results, but it's not the same as actually just witnessing. So I suppose the whole process in homeopathy is about witnessing somebody's inner, deeper story, and ideally the one they have forgotten.
That's so beautiful. I love that you come from there. Nikki?
Yes, this homeopathy is fascinating to me. I've never really known much about it. It's a new topic, and I was wondering if you can recommend the best way to learn more about it, aside from coming on and listening to you, hopefully on future podcasts.
And I was thinking, oh, there are lots of good elastoplast courses out there, which are great for moms with children. But the level of homeopathy I'm talking about at the moment is what I was delivering during COVID. I just did Zooms to practitioners, not all homeopathic, at this level. I do them from time to time. I might do them again in the autumn. And if you already have therapeutic levels and skills and response from clients, any old first aid course will do. And I can suggest a couple of books. But the sort of platform like this, because you already know it, you're just trying to learn a new language. Does that make sense? You already know how to do this stuff, and you just need to learn about a few remedies and what they can do, and take away your reservations about doing things, and it'll work for you. You know, if you go onto my website, there are some articles on there. There's also links that I can link you to some videos I've done, which might be interesting. I do charge for the videos because they took well, as you know, they take bloody forever to put together. When you've cut out glitches, even, you know, if you've got that sort of skill, which I did have in a previous life, you know. But yeah, so it's two level down. There are first aid books and courses. The best one I would suggest is Miranda Castro's Homeopathy Family, or Mother and Baby. I'd have to look up what it's called now. And that's a good entry. there's lots of people selling their, their courses on how to have a first aid kit that you'd learn it yourself from a book quicker. But
Beautiful.
some sort of platform where your level of experience, working with any homeopath that is prepared to just not see themselves as a homeopath, but to see themselves as a conduit to your learning, it would work for you. I might do something in the autumn. Again, I nearly got around to doing it again and didn't. And people, so what? The people email me, and then when there's about a dozen people, I get off my backside and do it.
So you guys email him at lennymarlow@gmail.com and engage with him and tell him how he can support you. And Lenny, listen to our inspiration and our calling and help pass the knowledge through and help us remember.
Yeah, and anybody wanting to courses, it's also useful for people to say what sort of time of day they can do courses. Okay.
All right, sounds good. Well, Lenny, thank you for joining us today. All of you, thank you for your interest and your open hearts. It's always wonderful to come together and pursue the truth together and pursue a better life. I'm honored that I get to play a role in that. And
That's
thank
why I
you.
was late. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Lenny, thank you for staying up so late. And
Okay.
yeah, we definitely appreciate you. And I'm going to ask everybody to unmute and say goodbye and go ahead and wrap this up. And
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
all right,
Bye.
bye everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
My pleasure.